Hi, this is Andrea Kane, and I'm here with you for HIT 120 Pharmacology. We are now on week 15, and this week we're going to focus on drug identification, the DEA, the FDA, and drugs that are considered dangerous. So let us move into this week's information. You will have a discussion and a quiz. The quiz will be based on the quick quiz questions off this PowerPoint. And we really don't have any course objectives or unit objectives this week. It's kind of coalescing a lot of what we have learned and what we need to apply. Um, it talked about how it's important for us to identify drug names and things like that, indications for usage throughout the course. And so this just builds on that. All right, so yes, we're talking about drug identification, drug information, drug safety and availability. We'll go a little more in depth into the FDA and the DEA about what they do, what their role is, what you need to know about them, when you might access their websites. And then we're going to talk about drugs that are considered dangerous. And this is not the whole list. These drugs are ones we really haven't talked about so far in this course. Other ones like opioids, stimulants, amphetamines, barbiturates, those we've already talked about. So I'm not going to, even though they are considered dangerous, I'm not going to address them here. So, how do we identify drugs? Well, there's a couple of different ways. If you have plenty of time, you can always go to the FDA's website and go here. The link is at the bottom, and you can have the FDA identify them for you. Now, granted, it says it's not an emergency service, but if you're not sure what a drug is, you can go to the FDA and get some help with identifying it. The second place you can go to is a website called drugs.com. And again, the link is here on the slide. They have what's called a pill identifier. And you can put in the imprint, the color, the shape, and it'll help you find what drug it is and be able to identify it. I thought this was really interesting about how you would look at the letters or numbers on the pill and how you would enter those and how that would help identify the pill. So that's here for you as well. So those are the two ways. You can go to the FDA, you can do drugs.com. I'm sure there's others, but these are two good ones that you can take with you. You can also search by drug name if you know what it is, or by NDC. And if you're not sure what an NDC is, you will be learning about that in your discussion this week about NDC numbers and the FDA's National Drug Code Directory. And then it gives you some information about what if your pill has no imprint code, what if it has a logo, what if it has been discontinued or is no longer commercially available. So again, you can go out to drugs.com and look at this information. Moving on to indicate information about drugs. So you know what the drug is, but you want to get more information about it. You can go to the FDA's website, which is probably the best place to go. And this is a screenshot. If you go to this site, and of course you can click on the link up here in the top left corner, and they have a video about drug information, what's the definition of a drug, things like that. So you could take a look at that information. At drugs.com, you can go ahead and put in drugs, pill identifier, interactions checker, side effects, and you can look at it by site section, or you can actually browse by drug treatment, condition, or class. So you've got different ways that you can find this information. You can enter it up here at the top. And you can also click on some of these buttons. And again, if you want to go here, the link is in the bottom left-hand corner at www.drugs.com. Where should you go to look to learn more about drug safety and availability? The FDA is really the best place to go to look for that information, and there is a link I've embedded up here at the top. Whoops, let me go back. Oops, too far. Okay, so It is about drug warnings, safety information, drug label changes, shortages, all sorts of stuff that you might need or want to know. And you can actually sign up with the FDA and they will push emails to you whenever something's been recalled, whenever there's been some type of situation with a drug, medication, food, even pet food. There's been recalls on pet foods. And when you sign up for their emails, they will send you that information as well. Unfortunately, a lot of the recalls take place months after there has been a problem. And 3, 6 months after a problem is when they issue the recall. Sometimes it's too little after the fact, but they have to investigate and it takes some time to trace back and figure out what caused what. And that's why some of those. But down here under resources for you, receive email updates for recalls and drug shortages. You can sign up right here for that if that's of something of interest for you. But anyway, the FDA is a great resource if you're doing anything drug related. All right, so where can you go to look up drugs to identify them? There are 2 places. Where can you go to look up information about drugs? Again, the same 2 places as question number 1. Where can you go to learn about drug safety? And where can you go to learn about drug availability? The answer to number 3 and 4 is the same thing, but it's only one answer. So hint, hint, hint there. All right, moving on. What is the FDA? What do they do? What are they all about? Those types of things. Well, the FDA regulates food, drugs, medical devices, radiation-emitting products, vaccines, bloods, biologic, animal and veterinary, foods, medicines, those types of things, cosmetics, tobacco products. Oh, mercy. They are a busy, busy place. They do a lot of, they handle the recalls and the market withdrawals, safety alerts, warning letters. They do inspections and compliance and all sorts of things. They have an import program. They do criminal investigations. They send warning letters. They give guidance about disposing of unused meds. They're involved with some science and research. They also look at combination products and they give information about emergency preparedness as it relates to food and drugs. So this is really what you need to know about the FDA. Just be able to recognize these things as FDA related. And FDA, in case I forgot to say, it stands for Food and Drug Administration. Food and Drug Administration. All right, so what about the DEA? What is the DEA? This is the Drug Enforcement Administration. So you have the Food and Drug Administration, and then you have the Drug Enforcement Administration. FDA is kind of on the front end of things. That's where they approve medications and get them out into market and manage them while they're in the market. The Drug Enforcement Administration is really on the back end of things at the end of the process of where drugs or controlled substances and things like that are being misused or illegally trafficked. Where things are not being used for the right purpose or are causing harm more than like a reaction. If it's just a reaction, that would be the FDA that would be involved in that. But when you're talking about, that there are people who are using or misusing a drug and it's causing criminal activity or it's causing them to put themselves in harm's way. We'll talk about inhalants and the fact that they can cause death. We'll talk about some other substances that cause people's senses to be disordered to the point where they may wander into traffic or do something else like that that's significant that puts them at risk or harm or puts someone else at risk or harm. So that's what the DEA is. So Drug Enforcement Administration. And their website is here at the bottom of the page. You can click to go to there. You can see who we are, about mission, their history, leadership, those types of things. So specifically, their responsibilities are investigating and preparing for prosecution of major violators of controlled substance laws operating at interstate and international levels. So that's where the DEA is involved, is interstate and international levels. So if it's something local, typically it'll be handled by local law enforcement. They also investigate and prepare for prosecution criminals and drug gangs who perpetuate violence in communities and terrorize citizens through fear and intimidation. They manage a national drug intelligence program with federal, state, local, and foreign officials to collect, analyze, and disseminate strategic and operational drug intelligence information. And again, what they're really trying to do is stop people who are trafficking in controlled substances or illegal substances at the interstate or international levels. They seize and cause forfeiture of assets derived from, traceable to, or intended to be used for illicit drug trafficking. They enforce the provisions of the Controlled Substances Act as they pertain to the manufacture, distribution, and dispensing of legally produced controlled substances. They coordinate and cooperate with federal, state, and local law enforcement officials on mutual drug enforcement efforts and enhancement of such efforts through exploitation of potential interstate and international investigations that are beyond local or limited federal jurisdictions and resources. They coordinate and cooperate with federal, state, and local agencies and with foreign governments in programs designed to reduce the availability of illicit abuse-type drugs on the U.S. market through non-enforcement methods such as crop eradication, crop substitution, and training of foreign officials. An example of this is I have some extended family members who do farming in the state of Michigan. And occasionally over the years, they have run across where someone has tried to plant marijuana in a section of one of their fields of corn or wheat, and they try to do that to disguise that they're raising the marijuana there, and typically it grows faster and gets harvested before the corn or wheat. So they plant, and then they harvest their marijuana and get out. But family members have found this and reported it, and so they've had officials in there that have come in to do crop eradication. So that would be an example of where you see non-enforcement methods. They're not trying to prosecute in that case. They're trying to get rid of the illegally grown item. And crop substitution takes place in foreign countries. A lot of times they'll support, for instance, in Pakistan or in areas of the Middle East where opium is poppy fields and opium are produced. They will work with them to try and figure out another crop that can be raised there that doesn't lead into drug trafficking. So, there's those kinds of things that they're doing. They have responsibility under policy guidance of the Secretary of State and U.S. ambassadors for all programs associated with drug law enforcement counterparts in foreign countries. And they are a liaison with the United Nations, Interpol, and other organizations on matters relating to international drug control programs. So if you go to the website, you can see they have fact sheets on drugs. They have drug policy information. They have drug scheduling information where you get into the schedules and those types of things. You can read the Controlled Substance Act and look at the federal drug trafficking penalties. And the fact sheets on drugs are what I used when I talked about the dangerous drugs that we're going to study this week. So the DEA, what it boils down to is they enforce laws related to scheduled, controlled, and or illegal drugs. They work with national and international agencies on drug intelligence, control, and enforcement. They educate the public on dangerous drugs like those used for poisonings, overdoses, addiction, and drugs or drug-related activities that are involved in crimes like sexual assault. You may have heard of some date rape drugs. That's some of those that are included on the dangerous list and that they're trying to get information out. In fact, if you go to the website here in the month of April, you will see that this is Sexual Assault Prevention Month, or keeping in mind those who have been victims of sexual assault and how the DEA wants to get information out so that people can be aware of the drugs that are misused for such a horrible, horrible crime. So there are all the categories under the drug facts which are considered dangerous drugs. They include, and I forgot to put in here, amphetamines and barbiturates, but cannabis, depressants, designer drugs, drugs of concern, hallucinogens, inhalants, narcotics, steroids, and stimulants. So there's quite a few categories there. All right, quick quiz questions. What does FDA stand for and what do they do? When might you go to the FDA website? What does the DEA stand for? What does the DEA do? And when might you go to the DEA website? What are all the categories under drug facts? And I apologize that I left off amphetamines and barbiturates off the previous slide. So just try and remember those if you can. All right, so this is the first one. Cannabis. Cannabis is another name essentially for marijuana. Marijuana is a mind-altering psychoactive drug. And so many of these that are on this drug list, that's the concern, is that it's a mind-altering drug. And I'm not just specifically talking about cannabis, because you'll see as we go through some of these other drugs, the biggest concern that the government has with these drugs is that they're mind-altering, meaning that they change people's perception of reality. They may cause them not to have depth perception, not to be able to see or feel accurately, and put themselves or others in danger. And so that's why many of these have ended up on the list that they have. So with cannabis, THC is believed to be the main ingredient that produces the effect. And THC has actually been synthetically produced, and we'll talk about that a little bit further as we get into this. So this just gives you information about marijuana, explains what it is, the street names for it, how it's used, and how it affects the body. So you can read through here. None of this information is going to be on the quiz, by the way. So what do you need to know about cannabis or marijuana? The short-term problems it causes are problems with memory and learning, distorted perception, difficulty in thinking and problem solving, and loss of coordination. The long-term problems that it causes include physical and psychological dependence with withdrawal, and because most frequently it is smoked, it leads to emphysema, chronic bronchitis, otherwise known as COPD, which we studied. We studied that a little bit when we were talking about the respiratory system drugs. And if you were in medical terminology, you studied COPD for sure when you were in the respiratory chapter. All right, and it also causes suppression of the immune system. So if someone uses cannabis or marijuana on a long-term basis, first of all, there's that dependence with withdrawal. There's the risk for COPD, and there is some indication that over long term, it suppresses the immune system. With cannabis, marijuana, there are no overdose concerns, because that's another one that the FDA and DEA look at, is overdose concerns. So there are no overdose concerns with cannabis or marijuana. Cannabis marijuana is a Schedule I substance, so it's under federal law. According to the FDA and DEA, there is no federal approval for medical treatment use at present because they don't believe it has any medical value. However, synthetic versions of THC, CBD have been approved for specific uses as Schedule III and V drugs. So even though natural cannabis marijuana has no approval for any medical treatment, a synthetic version of the active ingredient in cannabis marijuana has been found to be of medicinal use or medical treatment use for specific purposes. Now, when it comes to marijuana, it's one of those very complicated topics. And again, I'm going to avoid the politics and ask that you do too, because different states have legalized marijuana use. And so all I want to do with this information here is bring it to your attention that there's a seeming conflict between federal laws and state laws when it comes to marijuana. And it's important to understand that it is still illegal to use or possess marijuana according to federal law because it's a Schedule I controlled substance. But in the states that have approved its use, what they've done is decriminalized it, meaning even though it's illegal, you can't be prosecuted for it. So it's not so much that it's legal to use it, so much as in those states that have decriminalized it, you won't get punished for using it. And there are some states that have approved it for medical use. And so it goes through here and says Colorado, Washington, Alaska, Oregon, California, Nevada, Michigan, Maine, and Massachusetts have made it legal. And the hope, I think, with them is that they're trying to find a different way to manage it or to control it. The other piece of it is that by legalizing it, so to speak, in the sense of decriminalizing it and making it available, not only are they trying to control that industry, but they're gaining tax dollars for it. There's quite a bit of money involved. So there's those two things. But I guess what I want you to be aware of is that federal law still supersedes state law in that state laws cannot necessarily make it legal to use because of federal law. However, they can decriminalize it so that you cannot be punished for it, and that they can regulate it within their state for use. But it's, again, there's a lot of rules that go with it, and there's enforcement activities that go with it. So again, there's a lot of gray to this, but this is just here for you to read through and be aware of. Some of the areas that they have found cannabis, whether it's organic or synthetic, to be helpful with is patients that are undergoing chemotherapy to reduce their nausea, improve appetite. It's been used in pain management. It's been used to help control muscle contractions with MS. It has been used somewhat with insomnia, anxiety reduction, although they have found that in some cases it can increase feelings of paranoia. So moving away from cannabis and that area of grayness and seemingly conflicting federal and state laws, let's talk about designer drugs. These are synthetic drugs that have been created from controlled substances in most cases. They are designed to be illicitly produced, and that's why they're called designer drugs. These are not from drug companies. These are things that people have taken a controlled substance and modified specifically for the purpose of illicit use. And so this just gives you information about that. So the ones that we're going to talk about are U47700 and Spice K2, which is a synthetic marijuana. So they've created that synthetic version of THC. The next one is Flakka, and then bath salts. So let's talk about those. They're all synthetics designed from controlled substances or substances that are not intended or healthy for human consumption that are addictive. So that's the concern, is that all of these are addictive and all of them can cause overdose. So that's why they're listed here as being dangerous or of concern. According to the FDA and DEA, they have no medicinal purpose, so it's against federal law to use, misuse, sell any of those. So those are what are called designer drugs. And again, if you want more information, you can go out to the DEA's website. I've got it here in the bottom right-hand corner. Click on that, and it'll take you right to there, and you can click on each one and expand it, and it'll give you more information. So let's talk about drugs of concern. So we've talked about cannabis. We're not going to talk about depressants because we've already done that through our class. We just finished designer drugs. Now we're on to drugs of concern. So there are a couple of different drugs of concern, but the biggest one is called DXM. It's a cough suppressant that's in more than 120 over-the-counter cold medicines, and this is a legal drug. This is not a scheduled drug. It's not a controlled drug. It's a legal drug. Unfortunately, it has been misused. So let's talk a little bit about these. The first two I want to talk about, other than DXM, are Salvia divinorum and kratom. I'm not sure how the pronunciation is on that. But those two are drugs of concern. Again, you'll notice here they talk about the hallucinogenic effect, psychoactive plant, stimulant, sedative effects, those types of things. So kratom and Salvia divinorum are from plants. They're known to be addictive, but they do not have overdose concerns. However, according to the FDA and DEA, they have no medicinal purpose, so it's against federal law to misuse, sell, or use kratom or Salvia divinorum. Now let's talk about DXM, dextromethorphan. It's a synthetic substance known to be psychologically addictive. Notice that it's not physiologically addictive, it's just psychologically addictive. And it significantly impairs the senses. There are significant overdose concerns when DXM is abused with alcohol or other drugs like fentanyl or Xanax or things like that. So that's where DXM becomes a concern. It is a legally marketed cough suppressant that's not a controlled substance or a regulated chemical or anything like that. So it's legal, and used appropriately, it's a good cough suppressant. However, if it's overused or used inappropriately, used with alcohol or other significant drugs, that's when it can become very serious. So that's why it's a drug of concern. All right, moving on to hallucinogens. Hallucinogens are, again, they alter perception, mood, and can cause issues. So there are several of these. There's the, it's psilocybin, and this comes from different types of mushrooms. There's peyote and mescaline. Those are typically from out west. LSD, ketamine. Now, ketamine is used in normal medicine. It's a short-acting anesthetic, but unfortunately, it's been misused in several ways too. So that's why it's being addressed here. And then there's ecstasy. or MDMA. So let's talk about these hallucinogens. Most of these easily lead to overdose and some are addictive. They are all scheduled controlled substances deemed to have no medicinal or acceptable safe use, and that's why they're on the DEA's list. So going back to all of these, they all cause hallucinations, shall we say, or alterations in perception, mood. They can cause overdose and easily lead to overdose because when your senses are altered, you're not really aware. And so it's very easy to overdose. Some of these are also very addictive. So that's why they're all here. Inhalants. Inhalants are probably one of the worst ones. In reading up on this, it's actually, coming at it from the perspective of a parent, it's a bit frightening when you talk about inhalants. So let's get into this. These are invisible, volatile substances found in common household products that produce chemical vapors that are inhaled to induce psychoactive or mind-altering effects. There are more than 1,000 products that are very dangerous when inhaled. When I used to orient new employees to the department, one of my responsibilities was to talk about material safety data sheets and what were the hazardous materials that we had in the department and how to use them safely. And we had things like toner cartridges for the copiers and printers, and occasionally we had some correction fluid, although for the most part I banned that from a medical record standpoint because you don't ever want correction fluid. We did have some felt tip markers. We had air freshener. And so, the biggest joke was you don't sniff, you don't eat, those types of things. And we joked about it, but it's very serious here because inhalants are most often used by young children and teens. This is one of the areas that is the most concerning. Use of inhalants causes brain damage and cognitive abnormalities. Sometimes these are partially reversible and sometimes they are not, and they can result in death. I have two references for you down here in the bottom left. Inhalants.org is a really good place to go if you're looking at specific products or you're looking for information about this. And then, of course, there's the DEA website. The problem is that these products are perfectly fine if you use them appropriately. It's when they get abused, misused, that the problems happen. And so often, we think nothing of spraying air freshener or something else. Unfortunately, in some cases, children are really attracted to that. And if they get some kind of a positive feeling afterward, it can lead to some kinds of abuse. And as you can see here, the abuse can cause sometimes irreversible brain damage or cognitive abnormalities. So quick quiz questions. Where can you go to learn about drugs that are considered dangerous or controlled and scheduled? What are some drugs that are considered dangerous? Why are these drugs considered dangerous? What are some drugs that are controlled, scheduled? I'm sorry. So what are some drugs that are controlled, scheduled? Why? I guess it should be why. I'm sorry here. Number 5 should be why are these drugs controlled, scheduled? Sorry, typo there on my part. I'll get that fixed. When it comes to cannabis and marijuana, which law supersedes federal or state? Why, how, and when? You don't really have to know a lot of details about this, but just know that there are some conflicts, and ultimately federal law really does prevail in most cases. But whether or not federal law is enforced is sort of another situation in these states that have chosen to go their own way. And and even though federal law calls it illegal, the states can have a law that says we will not prosecute for use of it or purchase of it or what have you. And so even though it's illegal, it doesn't necessarily mean that illegal is going to lead to prosecution or that kind of thing. And where can you go to learn more about inhalants? So that is all I have for you this week. It's kind of short. It's not terribly sweet. Sorry about that. Next week, I will be back with a very short video. I mean, like 5 minutes, maybe 10 at the very most, about case studies. And then you'll have a discussion and a quiz next week as well. And then we are on to the end. And if you look at week 17 in content in Brightspace, you'll notice that I've added an extra credit opportunity. So those of you that have kind of struggled with this class, there is an opportunity to gain back some significant points if you are interested. And for those that are doing well, I'm super proud of you and awesome job. And if you have any questions or concerns, reach out to me. I hope you have a fabulous week. Take care.